Hello, art fans. This is Scott Thompson Art. I am your host, Scott Thompson, and today we're going to talk a little bit about choosing the right photograph for your painting. If you're not painting on location or painting from life or painting from your own still life setups, normally you'll be painting from a photograph. And oftentimes, choosing a good photograph makes the difference in a successful painting and a painting that is not successful. So, what do I look for when I'm looking for photographs or taking photos for reference material? I look for light and shadow. Those are the two most important elements, I believe, in creating a painting that is effective and just holds your attention. It's just sort of a dynamic statement. So I'm going to go through a few photographs which I have pulled and just kind of talk about sort of what I'm looking for and kind of give you an idea of what is a good photograph and what is not a good photograph. So take this first photograph here. This is just a basic landscape. Although it's divided down the middle in terms of composition, it's not very appealing in terms of how the space is broken up. But I'm pulling this photograph just to show you just a general sort of a midday afternoon type photo with not a whole lot of shadows and light coming down. We have sort of the no presence of light in the foreground. We have a little bit of light coming bouncing off the middle ground, and then some light here indicated in the clouds. Now, this is a good photograph for just testing your values, measuring your values, and kind of seeing if you can sort of match the color and see if you can get sort of a pretty good representation of what you're painting. With that being said, if you have the ability to have a computer monitor in your studio and you can upload pictures to your monitor and look at them on the monitor, you're going to get a better representation of what you're looking at. Oftentimes printers sort of skew the colors. They can make it a little bit warmer, a little bit cooler, and your values are sort of off. So the next best thing to painting on location would be to have a really nice computer monitor where you can sort of look at your photographs on the screen, nice lighting, nice backlighting from the monitor, and that gives you a little bit more of an accurate representation. Okay, moving on to the next photograph. Same thing here, we just have a basic landscape photograph. There's really no light and shadow. It's a midday photograph. And this is, again, just another example of, learning how to just sort of test out your skills when mixing your colors and your value ranges and see if you can just sort of match what's going on here in this environment. But again, there's no really directional light. This is a midday photograph. Once you've moved past learning how to really mix color and match your values, this would not be a good photograph, in my opinion, to do a painting from in terms of a landscape. Why? Because it's in the middle of the day. You're usually looking for something that's maybe mid-morning or late afternoon with those long shadows being cast across the bushes, nice backlit or nice directional lighting in the clouds, and you have those nice shadows. It makes for more of an interesting painting. This is a good example of sort of a sunset photograph. It's a little dark in this area just for the print quality. Again, if you pull this up on the computer monitor, it'd look a little bit more luminous and it'd have a lot more life to it. But again, you have strong light source, you have these dynamic shadows, and also you have this cool foreground juxtaposed with these nice warm tones in the sky and a little bit cooler tones up here towards the top of the sky. Remember how we talked in earlier lessons how the sky gets darker as we move up and it gets lighter as we move down based on the horizon line and the reflection of the colors within the landscape. Here's another landscape photograph just with cloud coverage. If you want to just sort of practice mixing your tones and lighting on your clouds, you got nice directional light coming in from this area. Again, you have a foreground that's pretty cool and in shadow, but that's a nice sort of complement to the warm lights going on up here in the sky. Okay, talking about portrait photography. Same thing applies. You want a nice directional light source coming in and sort of breaking up the space and showing you sort of, where my shadow shapes are, where my form shadows are, where my cast shadows are, and the way the light is coming in. The light is coming into this photograph from this direction, maybe a little more from this direction. But what we have here, we have a nice shadow shape cast right in this area. And we also have a nice cast shadow right here in this area below. So both of these elements make for a very dynamic portrait photograph as well as a portrait painting. The reason you want to look for photographs like this that are lighted properly is because of the strong shapes you get, and it's easy to block it in. It's easy to have a very effective and dynamic portrait. If I start flipping through a magazine, I'm not going to see much of this going on. Reason being is because the majority of fashion photographers, their job is to eliminate all shadows. So you have no shadows being cast on the face. You do a painting out of a magazine, and the result is just not that great. It's not that dynamic because there's no light and there's no shadow. Nice form shadows here, and again, cast shadows underneath the neck. Here's an example of a still life photograph. Same thing applies. Light's coming in from sort of this direction here, maybe a little bit up this way. You have sort of a nice, sort of a 70-30 split between your highlight side and your shadow side, and then you have your nice cast shadows coming off of the picture and the two vegetables. Now, when lighting a still life or face or anything in between, if you have a shadow that's being cast with a line right here down the middle, you don't want that. You don't want even shadow, even light side. What you want is 70% light, 30% shadow. And that makes for a much better still life setup and still life painting. Also, a quick note about still lifes. You want to sort of connect your objects in a way. You see how you have some nice overlapping with this element here against the picture, and then we have this nice little single element out here. Also, groupings of 3 tend to make a more interesting composition than even numbered groupings. Again, we have another portrait, same dynamic. We have nice directional lighting coming in sort of from this angle here. Look at this nice shadow shape coming around the cheek, around the orbital bone and the eye, dropping down from the nose and then down into the neck. Makes for a very dynamic portrait to be painted. These are the type of photographs you want to look for. If you want to take your own photographs, I will do a section on portrait painting down the road, and I'll kind of show you how to start blocking these things off in terms of the facial structure and sort of simplifying it and making just a much more efficient effort at completing a finished portrait. But again, lighting is critical with these, and directional lighting more importantly than anything. One more right here, same thing, light coming in from this direction. We have this nice shadow being cast in this area right here, and then a nice light hitting this area here. It's all about the light and the shadow. It gives, whether it be a still life, whether it be a landscape, whether it be an animal, whether it be a person, it gives what you're working on life. And that is what you want to achieve in painting. You don't want your painting to be dull and have no light and no shadows and just kind of sit there on the canvas. Again, this is a full figure, but same thing. You can see this nice cast shadow here in the background. You can see the shadow coming up, divided about that little bit more extreme than 70-30, almost an 80-20 split. But again, nice directional light coming in from this direction, and we have our shadow side and we have our light side. Also, it creates nice shapes. Now, you really maybe not be able to see the shapes from a color photograph, but if you run this on sort of a black and white copy machine, just basic copy, no photographic copy, it will break up into these nice shapes, and it will be much easier to read if you want to do a quick sketch or sort of see where your shadows are falling in your composition. Here's another one, 3 horses together. Also notice we have a number of 3. They are grouped together, they are overlapping, which is nice. There's not too much entanglement between the legs of all 3 horses. And on top of that, we have these nice long shadows coming down, light coming from this direction, striking this part of the horse, makes for a nice shadow side and a nice light side, which really makes for a really nice painting. Also, this grouping, very rarely do you find a photograph where everything is sort of grouped together like you like it, but this is just a nice little photograph. I would probably do something if I was going to paint this and use this for a painting. I probably would try to maybe drop out some of the landscape back here in the back and maybe add a little more sky and a little cloud cover. But for the most part, I wanted you to see the grouping and the lighting and the way it's hitting the animals. Here's another example right here. Again, strong lighting on this horse. Coming sort of from this direction this time, but it's sort of spilling over the backside this way, casting the shadow in this direction. But again, look at this nice little pattern here of the mane that's being cast, the shadow. Also, if you notice, look at the shadows. Sometimes we tend to think of shadows as being black and dull, but look at all these nice sort of blues and sort of lavender colors in this shadow, which really makes it very lifelike. It makes it very lively. I will discuss in further segments sort of how to make shadows that look very appealing and are colorful with at the same time being shadows. Again, we have another portrait here, again with directional lighting. Look at this shadow shape here. You can really see it. It's really defined in this one in particular. Cast shadow coming down from the face. This is a form shadow. This is a cast shadow underneath the nose. But look at this nice interlocking shape coming around here, and then back and drifting off this way. We have our light side, our light source coming in from this direction, and we have our shadow side on this side. Makes for a really good setup in preparation for a portrait. And lastly, one more small little still life. This one is not overly complicated, just a cup and saucer. But again, you have your shadow side and your light side. Now I probably would, if I was going to paint this, I probably would move my shadow side a little bit over. It's sort of creeping a little bit close to the middle. Just move it over a tidge. And then you have your nice shadow side, you have your light source coming in from this direction. So these are the type of photographs you want to look for when doing a successful painting. Try to avoid photographs that have no shadow shapes and no directional light source, and I think you'll be okay.